Welcome to the podcast, What Your History Textbook Left Out. On this podcast, we focus on telling undertold histories and cultures in order to broaden students' understanding of contemporary issues. In particular, as the next generation, it is our job to improve our communities with equity and inclusion in mind. On this episode, we're talking to Condor Kaan, the founder of the Praxeum in San Jose and a Guardian Art Gym. Welcome aboard.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Isaac.
All right, just to kick off, could you explain to our audience what Guardian Art is?
Yeah, so Guardian art is a type of fighting art, and it's different from the martial arts in a couple ways. For one, the purpose is very different. So in a lot of martial arts, the purpose is more for self-defense, protecting yourself. But this is called Guardian art because of the word guardian, someone who protects others. So students are not learning just to protect themselves, they're also learning to help and protect others. So with that, the lessons go, as you progress, there's more and more team building type of trainings that you do. The other thing that makes Guardian art very different is where it comes from. So a lot of the martial arts, it will come from Asia and a lot of those type of cultures, whereas Guardian art has indigenous roots.
And while we're on that note, could you expand a bit more on that and give a bit of history of Guardian art?
Yes, so basically, when I learned Guardian art, it wasn't really called Guardian art. So if you look at the history of indigenous people, particularly Native Americans, there was a history of being called the wrong thing, where, for example, they were called Indians, right, for a very long time. And so we wanted to be very careful with what things were called. So that's part of this. So I'll continue to dive into that, because we look at a lot of the martial arts when it came over to America. The word martial arts is a Western world trying to describe a lot of Asian things. So when like kung fu, karate, taekwondo, whatever it was, came to America, they kept the word from that language, but they lost the meaning. So we wanted to keep the meaning. So we decided to okay, let's make sure we preserve what we're trying to do, which is trying to help others versus just doing self-defense. So the word Guardian art was translated into what we were learning. We were learning to help and protect others. With that said, the current form of Guardian art, a lot of it has indigenous ties, but a lot of what you might see physically comes from a lot of the evolution that was placed over time, just to advance what we were teaching. For example, just with anything, anytime you do a sport, it always advances, right? Like physically. So a lot of the techniques, a lot of the flipping, climbing, like a lot of the equipment. So when we were first doing this and doing all the obstacle course training, because I learned a lot of it outside in the form it's called spirit running, and a lot of people nowadays would call it something like parkour, for example. But when we're learning outside and we're trying to teach it, it was very hard to get people wanting to meet like a stranger in the middle of the woods or something. So we realized we had to build a gym. And we built this gym. We started our program in 2004 indoors. And the main reason was, when we're doing it, it wasn't ever meant to be a business. It was always meant to try to preserve a lot of the teachings that we had. Also, especially the teaching of, instead of just thinking about yourself and protecting yourself, learning to protect and help others.
But to my understanding, the Praxeum facility here actually only started around a year ago. Could you give a bit more of the history of the facilities and how the Praxeum came to be?
Yes, so exactly. So we're actually going to celebrate our 1-year anniversary in 2 weeks. So it's pretty cool because it's in line with the Indigenous Peoples Month. So before here, we were in Fremont, and before Fremont, we were in Milpitas and San Jose. So over time, a couple things happened, which is the main thing is that we just kept getting bigger. So we needed a bigger space. So this is our biggest space yet. It's 10,000 square feet, and we're still building. So if there's a video of our space, we're probably only 70% done with what we're doing. So we just got our airbag actually yesterday. And then we're probably going to build another tower and then add more bars to everything. So this place is going to be pretty wild.
Do you go into how you believe Guardian art impacts your students?
Yeah, so all the lessons, the focus on what we really want to improve the students on are in 2 life skills. And the way we kind of simplify it for the students is we call it garden powers, which is strong mind and strong care. And each of those things can always go deeper. For example, in strong mind, on the beginner level, it's a lot of training your focus, right? But as you advance, it's not only training your focus, but you start having to think strategically, start thinking with other people, having courage, having something called confront. And then for the strong care, that one's really important because I feel like a lot of places, at best, they might be teaching respect. But the problem that we found with the word respect, for example, and that's what a lot of martial arts use, is that the word respect is very hard for even an adult to define. And we found that if an adult has a hard time defining it, how can we expect a kid to really understand it? And not only that, every culture has a different idea of what respect means. So some cultures, for example, the culture I grew up in was like, respect is listen to your elders, do whatever they say, don't talk back. But of course, when I, would go to school in America, it would be like the golden rule: do to others as you would want them to do to you. So it's like it was very confusing. So when you teach care, it's a lot easier to understand. But care goes into appreciation, right? Which is, I think, a very important thing to learn. And it goes into, obviously, for example, when you talk about care, care ties into keeping relationships healthy. And it also ties into, I think that's a key component to having any good teamwork. And I think it's a key component to keeping harmony between people as a whole. And when I say harmony, I don't mean like not arguing, because I feel like, for example, most parents, husbands and wives, right, they're choosing the people they want to be with, and even they argue, right? But because they have care with each other, most of the time they'll be able to find a solution through that care. But right now, for example, I personally believe a lot of the wars are happening. It's very hard to solve when there's no care between people. And that's where, when you don't care, the opposite happens, where you don't want to take care of someone, you might want to destroy someone. So I think those are very important life lessons to learn.
So, like along those lines, appreciation is one thing that we value a lot with, and it ties to culture, right? So, how do you think garden art can play an important role in the preservation of culture, and thus kind of a role in the preservation of this appreciation?
Well, it's going to do it in 2 ways. The direct way is that the teaching of just caring for things beyond not only humans, but like the land, is an indigenous teaching. So by just doing that, that preserves that cultural teaching. But the other way is when you get your care strong, then you learn to, I guess, honor other cultures. And when I say honor other cultures, it doesn't really necessarily mean like becoming the other culture, but just being open to learning about it and trying to understand it, right? So I think when that happens, it's when you don't care about other cultures that, the clashing happens, right? Where someone feels the word disrespected, right? Like what? Like just imagine showing the reverse, like showing not care for somebody. That's equivalent to the word disrespect if you want to look at it that way. So I think that's a fundamental thing that's going to help in the preservation of like
Culture and identity, yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. And while on the topic of inclusion and culture, how do you think garden art can play a role in kind of developing an inclusive space for everyone to be in?
So when we're talking about inclusive space, we're really talking about, like, in my mind, people who are making it not inclusive, right? Like which we call right now bullies, right? People who are harming other people or making people feel not included. So this is where it gets extra important, because a lot of places, when you learn how to deal with bullies, it's more just like for yourself. Like, okay, I'm more going back to like a self-defense mindset, right? But in garden art, the lessons tie into, okay, how can you stand up for somebody else? I believe in the same way I don't think we're ever going to stop bullies from happening, Okay, I think that's impossible. So trying to get bullies to not being bullies, I think it's a dead end. But I do believe that we can get people to be more heroes, anti-bullies. So imagine if like, because the person who's getting bullied normally are the weaker ones. To just tell them to talk back, to tell them to stand up, it's going to be extra difficult for them. But imagine someone else standing up for you. That's going to empower you, and that's going to help kind of make the bullies happen a lot less, right? The problem I see is like there's not someone stand up for you right now. Even sometimes when I listen to the teachers and the parents, there'll be a lot of complaints about bullies, but the solution of it is, a lot of the kids like would be like, "Oh, tell the teacher," and oftentimes the teacher doesn't or not doesn't try to do anything, but they're limited of what they're allowed to do. But if another peer stood up for that person, we always found that that was a lot more powerful for the person getting bullied. So that ties into building healthy communities too. And when you build healthy communities, naturally that creates, so instead of just like inclusive in a way where trying to get people together, it's more, there's no community if there's no care. Going back to that. Just because you're not like saying anything bad doesn't mean it makes someone feel comfortable. So we need the opposite of that, where okay, how do we support one another? How do we support one another with the care, but also standing up for each other?
Do you have any examples of how this has been applied?
Yes, I actually get a lot of stories from the students where actually the parents come and they're really proud of their kid because there's just stories about them standing up for somebody else, even standing up for other adults. Like a recent story I just heard was there was a parent who was the kids were playing soccer, and there was a drunk parent that came in and started like going crazy on like acting weird, going crazy on the coach, and one of the students stood up to that drunk parent, right? And no one else, not even the other parents were standing up for them. And that's what I mean. There's not people like, it's very rare to have someone stand up for you. Yeah. So like, it just shows you where we're at as a community. There's no, like, it's hard to practice being good at community if there's no opportunities to, and there's no lessons of improving it, right? You can't get better at something without practicing. So here's a place to practice that. On a personal scale, like, I found this, and this always stuck with me, and reason why I really want to push this was, when I was younger, there was a kid who was handicapped, and he got teased a lot. And we told on the teachers, and it never stopped the bully from teasing that kid. And one day I was like, "Hey, if you tease him again, I'm gonna punch you in the face." Okay, and then he did it. I punched him in the face, and he stopped getting bullied from there. I mean, I don't know if that's the best story because, like, it's not so much I condone violence. That's not the point of it. But sometimes it takes another person to stand up for someone to stop. It's not like you can't, always rely on the teacher, because the teacher can't be everywhere, right? So you have to learn to stand up yourself.
How do you see Garden Art expanding, and what are your plans for the future?
So Garden Art, like I said in the beginning, was never meant to be a business. It was always meant to really pursue that goal of being a garden, helping others. So right now, where we're trying to expand is our nonprofit side. One of the things we're doing at the moment is connecting to a lot of local organizations, other nonprofits that work with underserved communities. Because before we were really focused on Indigenous people, and we still want to, definitely. But we also want to, the dream was never to just focus on them. The dream was to help anyone who needed help. And we feel like we want to help the underserved communities locally. That's going to be a lot easier for us than traveling really far. So we're trying to expand that part. The other part that we're doing is, this place right now is just we've only been here a year, right? In that transition, moving from Fremont to San Jose, to be honest with you, there was, even though there was a lot of growth, there's also setbacks because a lot of people couldn't drive that far. So, we're coming up with a lot of visions, not only to expand this place in the short term, but the larger vision, of course, is the big vision is to expand how much access, not so much expand like business wise, but expand how many people can have access to this type of program long term. So we want to do camps and workshops, not so much only for the kids, but for community mentors. So they could learn how to teach future kids gardening art. So we want to build more instructors. So that's my next dream right now.
Yeah. And while we're on that note, if anyone does want to reach out to plan a workshop, you can definitely reach out to actually Condor Kaan or I, and then we'll try and get one scheduled.
Yeah, so as a free workshop, no one's ever not had fun. In reality, people actually pay us a lot of money to do these workshops. But we decided to actually stop our birthday services because a lot of people do these workshops as a birthday thing, so that I could make more time to do nonprofit stuff because that's what I really care for. I find that if I'm not leading the way of being a guardian, I can't expect any student to be a guardian as well.
Yeah. On guardiansaga.support, there are some records of some of the past workshops with, I think, Fresh Lifelines for Youth, nonprofit that works with kids on probation. I think FCSN we partnered with for a few times. And I believe you guys did one with
American Indian
Resource Center.
Yep.
So yeah, if there's anyone watching who wants to, or knows anything where we could connect to that, just please reach out and we'll get something scheduled.
We actually also recently, it's on the website too, we're offering scholarships for underserved youth. We're also offering for just day-to-day classes, and also scholarships for camps in the future too.
Awesome, yeah. And just thank you for coming on board, and thank you for answering all these questions.
And thank you for putting your extra time into wanting to push things in a very healthy and positive way. I really appreciate that you're taking our lessons of care and putting it into action. So next team thrive to you guys.